Hello, in this video, we're gonna deal with three things. The first one is why is it money keeps flowing into our bank accounts and flowing right back out? What is the problem that it doesn't stay? What do we need to do or what aren't we doing? So that's the first question. Why does money keep flowing in and right back out? But what we're also gonna talk about is at a top level, what the reason is that happens. What is the reason that we struggle with finances the way we are? Number three, we're going to invite you to a free process that we're going to walk you through to begin to change the situation. Now, without much ado, let me just dive straight into the presentation. The gist of our approach to the solution is to challenge you to see what is it that you can become. It's very difficult to become something unless you can see it first, or at least become aware of the possibilities. Now, here what we have is a list of the questions that so many of us are asking, that so many of us have been asking for a very long time. But we're still struggling up to this point to find, but why is this happening? Like, number one, why does it feel like no matter how hard I try, money always slips through my fingers? Or like number six, why does why do money struggles cause tension in my relationships or make me feel isolated? Or number eight, why does thinking about my financial future make me anxious or afraid? The list of questions is endless, but the fundamental question is you probably aware of some of this and you've asked yourself some of this. What we have here is just an indication that our approach is really about financial literacy, because we have realized the fundamental reason so many of us struggle with money is because we don't understand the language of money, we don't understand the landscape of money, and we're trying to change that. Now, what this is not about is this is not about quick fixes, it's not about microwave solutions. This is the most important part of the presentation. Everything in the universe is controlled by principles. Now, you and I live in a universe that's controlled by principles. And by extension, we are also controlled by principles. So, we're saying is principles dictate the outcome after you have chosen an input. So, you choose an action, and it's the principles that will determine whether you succeed or you don't succeed. You don't choose the result. It's principles that do that. So the logical thing, therefore, is to understand principles that are applicable at any given moment, in any given situation, so you can align your actions with those principles for the likelihood of getting a more appropriate outcome. Now, the second point that I want to stress out here is that as a human being, you're a spiritual entity that's also a physical entity. This is very simple to explain. Here is Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul is 102 years old. 1 minute Mr. Paul is alive, the next minute Mr. Paul has died. So his body, when he has died, has something missing that was the source of life. That something is spiritual, because in the field of science, we can't point out what it is. We know when it's there and when it's not there, but we don't know what it is. So that something is spiritual. Now, what do we mean by spiritual? I'll explain that in a minute. But here is the important part. As a human being, you're made up of two types of matter. Matter number one is spiritual matter. Matter number two is natural matter. Now, spiritual matter is wired for relationships, and natural matter is wired for increase. So to be fruitful, you've got to make sure that you use both legs of your being, the spiritual and the natural. So the spiritual, it's about relationships, and the most powerful relationship form is love. On the other extreme, we have the opposite of love, which is what? Which is pride, right? Now, in economics, we talk about these two interchangeably. Like, we talk about them without necessarily making a differentiation. So in our approach, we have what we call biblical economics, where love is the cornerstone. And also we have what's called Babylonian economics, where pride is a cornerstone. So like I'm saying, in classical economics, you have the two being mixed throughout. Now, the important part is what happens to the natural side of things. It's you are born into this world with gifts and with a very clear purpose. Even though I know from experience, a lot of people don't know what their purposes are or what. And the second part is their family that you welcome into, their responsibility is to help you become an independent individual. Now they do that through taking you to school, etc. They help you to get a skill. Now you use the skill to create solutions to problems, right? So your value to your ecosystem is in creating solutions that that people in the ecosystem struggle with. And the third part is the tribe. This is the ecosystem. This is the community. This is the market. In marketing terms, we call it. So it's about building. So you have a solution and you need to take that solution to the marketplace and use that building as you help people to achieve things. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but essentially we're saying your impact is about how you help improve the lives of the people in the ecosystem. Now, let's take a step back to say it's you, it's your family, it's a tribe, right? And we say your responsibility is to believe in yourself. And number two is that solution, you've got to be clear what is the promise that you offer. The two of us can be plumbers, but one of us is doing better than the other one. What is the difference? We both plumbers, we have the same set of skills. The difference is the solution. It's the promise, not the solution. It's we offer the same solution, but the promise is different. When one person shows up, they shows up with the plumbing solutions plus everything else. Remember the part about relationships? And it's that difference that really makes one person excel versus the other one. We are assuming obviously that everybody, the skill level is the same. So it's important for you to tell your ecosystem what you sell, right? And so you are in the selling business. Communication is selling, but it's really about the impact in your ecosystem. The more people you help, the more income you are going to make or you should make. Now, what we are about is to challenge you to grow what we call money trees. Now, it's very easy to understand this metaphor. If you're in the business where you need a lot of apples, the logical thing is to plant a lot of trees that will give you the apples that you need. So we're saying you and I, as living beings, need money to survive. So one way of getting the money is to go to work and do everything else is fine. That's okay. But if you want more than the usual work, is to see how else can I plant money trees, and these money trees are going to generate or are going to produce money fruit, the same way that an apple tree will produce apple fruit at the end of the day, and then you can take those fruit and go sell them to generate more money. So essentially, a money tree is a growth engine. A money tree is an asset that either appreciates in value or generates cash flow, or it does both. Now, your biggest barrier is internal, right? It's your set of beliefs. Now, what this is saying here is a tree will become as resourceful as the root system. Remember, we spoke about principles. Now, you are your biggest enemy in the sense that some of the things that you believe about yourself and about how the world works are totally dysfunctional. So you become what you believe. Your actions are the practical expressions of your belief. What we have here is what we call the belief action spiral. Your actions start out as beliefs, or beliefs are the roots of your actions. Then you have the mindset, thoughts, feelings, actions, and then the outcome. So your outcome is the practical expression of your beliefs. Now, as human beings, obviously, as Abraham Maslow explains in this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this pyramid, we have different levels. Now, here I'm just going to stick with the 5 levels and not complicate things. So we have the physiological needs, we have the safety needs, and we have all these other needs. But what's important is we all have to satisfy those needs. How are we going to meet those needs? Right? Now, there's something called the financial planning pyramid. Now, I'll talk about it in a minute. It's essentially saying what are the types of assets that are going to help us to meet those needs, to pay for those needs. Now, this is what a financial planning pyramid looks like. At the base, you see the relationship with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have earnings, okay, and cash flow, and then we have level 2, which is about minimizing risk, and that's where we're saving, and number 3, which is about asset accumulation. And let me just say at this point, the biggest reason so many of us are struggling financially, even though we earning good salaries or we have good income, is because we're not operating on that third layer of the pyramid. Okay, and then we have obviously the fourth layer, which is about wealth preservation. It's about tax planning, it's about estate planning, etc. Now, what I want you to see is basic personal financial planning. It's not very complicated. It starts, as I've explained, with earnings, and it's about foundation, where it's also about security, etc. Now, this is not very complicated because it's just similar to creating a functional garden. You prepare the soil and sow seeds, etc. Now, this is what's important, right? Remember, we spoke about how you are a spiritual entity that's also a physical entity. And we also spoke about how principles dictate the outcomes. Here we're saying so many of us are broke because we trying to solve problems at the action level, right? If you look at that belief action spiral, we trying to solve problems at the level of actions. Now, when you've tried and tried and tried and nothing works, you need to trace your steps back and go to the beliefs. So what we have here is the blessing wealth building adventure. Okay, essentially the word blessing is just the first letters of all those. First is beliefs and mindset, and it's learning. So this is how we take people through this adventure, is to start learning. Okay, when your beliefs change, it means you need to be learning new things to be in line with the new beliefs. And number 3 is you need to look at any in a different way. So you don't necessarily need to do, even if you don't change anything, you just change how you see things, you will most definitely see significant improvement. And number 4 is to save, number 5 is to invest, and number 6 is to manage wisely. That wisely part is very important. So essentially we're saying more income, more assets, more wealth. There are people who have a lot of income, but they don't buy assets, and consequently their resources, their money gets depleted every now and then. So the reason so many of us are struggling with finances, even though we've been working for so many years, even though in some cases we earn a lot of money, is because we do not have those money trees I spoke about. Now, remember also that the money in your bank account, the money in your wallet, the money in your purse is not all yours. A significant chunk of it is going to go to the taxman. Another portion is going to go to fees. Now, when you invest, especially in things like mutual funds, etc., you've got all these fees that you have to pay. Now, your responsibility obviously is to minimize these expenses as much as possible. And then also, of course, it's inflation. Now, that's where it's important for you to be getting assets, having inflation in mind as well. Now, the primary wealth building drivers are yourself, time, and assets. Another way of looking at this is you are the pilot of your financial aircraft, and you have these two critical levers, these two critical tools. You can call them these two critical employees. Their names are time and assets. We call them the power couple. Now, what the superpower that time has is multiplication. You need to give your time assets, and it's critical what kind of assets you give your time. If you give it consumption assets, it's going to multiply them and you're going to end up with a lot of expenses. But if you give it productive assets, your time is going to multiply them and you're going to end up with more. And that's essentially what we say. So the fundamental reason, okay, I'll mention two, they related in a way. Number one is your beliefs, right? Our beliefs are messed up. They are not in alignment with the principles of increase, of multiplication. So that's the first part. The second part is we as the pilots of our financial aircraft, we don't use the levers that we have. Your time is your employee. Your time wants to serve you. So you're supposed to use the money that you get from your work, from your job, and start buying assets little bit by little bit. If you start in your 20s, by the time you reach 40, you should have a lot of assets. But most of us don't have anything to show because all we've been doing is buying consumption assets and never really seriously invested in those money trees I spoke about earlier. Now, obviously, assets, there's a whole host of different types of assets. Now, in the journey that we're going to be walking you through, we'll go into detail explaining this and how time. But this is the important part. The reason you're struggling with finances is because you are the master who has two very faithful and powerful servants. Okay, let's call them employees. And one is time, another one is assets. They're sitting there idling. And what happens when you have a faithful worker who wants to work, but you're not giving them the work, the job to do? They go work for somebody else. So what happens is our time through compounding begins to work against us, because instead of earning compounding, we paying it. Okay. And again, the assets, like I said, we don't buy the right kind of assets, and they just keep taking from us. Like it's a car that we need to be fixing it every now and then instead of doing something a lot more productive. Now, this is like fascinating conversation. So we're gonna unpack this. Obviously not here, but this is part of the journey that we're going to be walking you through. Now, here is something that's very important. It's called TMT arbitrage. T stands for time, M for money, and the second T also stands for time. So this is how it works, right? Use your time, like when you start working in your 20s, to earn income, right? That skill that I spoke about and the solutions that you provide as an engineer or a lawyer or whatever, and you earn income. You need to make sure you put some of that income aside, right? And you use that money to buy productive assets. When I spoke about like consumption type assets, so there are like those money trees, you put some of the money aside to buy those, and those assets eventually are going to start generating income or appreciating in value, and they will free your time up so you can begin to do things. Let me make a simple example. I start a business. What is the first thing that I'm gonna do once my business begins to grow? I'm gonna start hiring people. Do you see what the people that I'm hiring? Do you see what role they play? I'm gonna pay them. They become my assets, my productive assets. Now they free me from doing some of the mundane stuff I used to do. Then I can begin to focus on creating more productive stuff. So it's TMT arbitrage, saying use the time to generate money, take some of the money to buy productive assets, and the assets are gonna free you up so you can begin to do the things that you like. Right now, the third reason, okay, that so many of us are not where we could be financially is because we do not take the generational view. We look at things in the short term. I want to benefit, I want to benefit today, I want to benefit tomorrow. We don't take like a 20-year view, a 50-year view, a 100-year view. And if you did that, everything will turn around. You'll begin to see great difference. Now, essentially what we're saying is, in the quest to build money trees, you have to be very intentional, and then you have to understand which principles are applicable. Now, the core of everything is your set of beliefs. With the same set of beliefs that have led you to being struggling with finances, you are not going to get out of it. Even if money comes into your life, you're going to find spectacular ways of spending it. I mean, we see this with like high paid athletes. After a few years, they like really poor again. Now, this is what we are going to do. This is what I'm saying as the journey. Now, this is going to be free, and it's going to be virtual. And so you have no excuse. I mean, there's very little risk other than the time that you're going to be spending, okay, to give this a try and see if it's something that will help you. So we've got the blessing series of challenges. Okay? So we remember we spoke about the blessing model. It's beliefs, it's learn, earn, save, invest, and manage wisely. So the way we've structured them is number one is what we call the money slave to money master challenge. The This is phrased on the basis of the problem that we have. Our relationship with money is dysfunctional. I spoke about how your assets and your time are your employees. You're supposed to, be giving them instruction on what they need to go do for you. But we're not doing that. So we are allowing our employees to dictate to us. So many of us look at money with like trepidation, but we actually should be doing it the other way around. Now, it's part of the beliefs. So this is what that challenge is about. Okay. So we're gonna go through money slave to money master challenge, like to do that mindset shift. The second one is about generating a surplus. Remember, we're skipping number two because number two is like learning, is what should be happening throughout. And so it's about generating a surplus. You earn, you always have to say, I need to be setting some money aside. If as you say, so it's the surplus, really, you saving, so your expenses have to be less than what you earn. Okay, is a safety net challenge. Okay, and then number three is the investment basics. All right, so plant your first money tree. Remember when I spoke about the financial planning pyramid? That third layer, it's where so many of us are not active. We're not buying bonds. We're not buying shares on the stock exchange. We're not doing anything. We have money and then we buy all these big TVs and these expensive cars, etc., when we should be investing some of the money for the future. And the fourth one is unlock new streams, the income growth challenge. And the fifth one is manage wisely, build a legacy challenge. Is that whole generational view that I spoke about. Now, essentially, what we're saying is our challenge to you as we'll be walking through these challenges is to see you having an orchard of money trees. Remember what money trees are? Are these productive assets, right? So if you have an orchard of money trees, you get to a point where they generating enough income for you that you can stop doing the work that you hate that you're currently doing. So many of us go to work because we need the money, but if you start doing this early enough, you'll get to a point where you can quit and instead do the work that aligns with your purpose, with your values, with your life goals. That's essentially what we're talking about. Financial freedom is really when you have that orchard that is doing things for you. Now, summary and how you can join the adventure. So, number one, we say everything it's about principles. So you need to understand principles that are applicable in relation to what you're trying to achieve. Because you can't cheat principles. Let me rephrase that. Your attempt to cheat principles will only work for a certain period. Okay. Um, in some cases, the results, the consequences are instantaneous, immediate. In other cases, they take a period of time. Like gravity, you can't really cheat gravity. But with like health, it takes time until everything collapses because you haven't been leading a healthy lifestyle. So that's the first part, principles. Number two is beliefs. Now, I've explained a little bit about beliefs. So the first challenge, we're going to go into detail, explaining these beliefs and challenging you, walking you through how to actually start interrogating some of those beliefs so that you can pivot and start embracing more productive beliefs, right? And the third one is, this is what this is about. Start planting money trees. Okay. And essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a WhatsApp group, a Facebook group. But the important part is videos like this are going to be housed on our YouTube channel. So when we have virtual sessions, we will share like content, but a lot of it will be based on what would be on the YouTube channel. So we're going to post a lot of videos there. So we'll specify like for the next session, it's important that you go and listen or watch this video, etc. So that when we have a conversation, um, when you're having a virtual session, the conversation can be productive because you would be familiar with things. And so that's essentially, I think, what we're talking about. Now, I come back to what I said at the beginning. To see something is a prerequisite to becoming it. If you want a breakthrough, you need to get new insights. And this is what this journey is really about, where we're going to be challenging you to do things in a slightly different manner, in some cases, in a radically different manner. What I'm saying is, some cases, you will only have to make a minor adjustment. In some situations, you will have to make a huge adjustment. So essentially, having come to the end of this presentation, this is what I'm saying to you. We're going to be doing this virtually, and we're going to be posting content on the web. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it should be possible for you to access the material and start the challenge with us. We're going to be going through cycles where we focus on this challenge and that challenge and that challenge. So it's important to follow us on Facebook and the website and see where we are so you can join at the appropriate time. What I'm saying is, if you want to change your financial future, it's not that complicated. You have to start with beliefs, and you have to understand the power of principles, and you need to commit to growing your own money trees, because it's the money trees that are going to change things around. Remembering also, we're talking about biblical economics and Babylonian economics. This is where love comes into the picture or pride comes into the picture. You know, so many people, I remember I attended it was a business seminar, and Oprah Winfrey's husband, Stedman Graham, was one of the speakers, and he spoke eloquently about how love is the most powerful force in the universe. And I was sitting there thinking, I mean, I've been to economics classes, I've been to like business school, etc. I've never had anybody talk about love in the context of business. And it took me a while before I realized that the companies that are very successful, think of Apple, think of like Samsung, and a whole lot of other companies, they're successful because they love their customers. They ask the question, if we do this, would this be in the best interest of our customers? And the answer, well, I know that because I used to work for one of those companies. It's got powerful brands, and we would always ask the question, how do we give the consumer, the customer, the best possible experience? And essentially what I'm saying is, even though it may not be apparent, love is at the root of a lot of the successful companies. Of course, there are people who are successful because they're ruthless, talk about gangsters, etc. We know some people in the world who are like that, but that's a different conversation altogether. So all I'm saying is, we're here to challenge you. The journey is free, but you have to commit. And let's see what you will say after having gone through the first few challenges. I can guarantee you that that first challenge is a challenge that is going to help you to really make a very significant pivot. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.
The material provided in this financial literacy presentation should be used for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be, and should not be relied upon as financial advice. Consult a qualified financial professional before making any financial decisions or taking any actions based on the information provided.